Call to order. Roll call.
Director Blackwelder,
Here.
Director Polito,
Here,
Director Askew.
Sorry, here.
We have a quorum.
So first on the agenda is the election of committee chair. Does anybody want to make a motion or a recommendation for somebody?
I'd like to make a motion that you continue as our chair.
I'll second that.
There you go. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay,
Congratulations, Director Blackwell.
thank you. Takes a lot of work to be a chairperson for this committee. Do the best I can.
I was practicing turning it down.
You are. I was kind of practicing recommending you. But it didn't work too quick.
Okay.
Okay, public comments, any public anywhere?
I show them online.
And then we have, discussion of the, it looks like, just the consent calendar, right?
I think we have to do roll call vote since I'm remote from a notice location.
Oh, I see. Okay, so 5.1 is approving the minutes from April.
Do we need him to do a roll call vote on the elected, folks? Yes?
Yeah, roll call vote.
Roll call vote on the election of the,
Since
the
it's
chair.
doing video, we need to do a roll call.
Okay.
Director Askew,
I,
Director Polito,
Aye.
Chair Blackwelder,
Aye.
we have a quorum. I'm sorry, motion done.
Okay. All right, so there's no public comment because there are no public, and then we go to discussion, and 5.1 is approved April 3rd, 2024 Personnel Committee minutes. Is there a motion to approve that?
I wasn't here, so I can't make a motion.
Okay, let's see if we're here. I'll move we approve.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Director Askew,
I,
Director Polito,
Abstain?
Chair Blackwelder,
Yes.
motion passed.
5.2 is review of the Personnel Committee bylaws. I saw them, I read them, we're just, is that kind of mute? We're not approving anything, right? It's just that,
just reviewing.
okay. And then we have a presentation of the preliminary budget. So I imagine that's, good?
Yes.
No. Bylaws, this for clarification on the bylaws have been provided. The reason why we had it on the agenda is to take any considerations on changing those bylaws. Staff will take, the first, opportunity to review those bylaws and come back with any suggested changes, to those bylaws if they're needed. And it'll give, the three members here an opportunity to send me any suggestions on the bylaws as well, and then we can come back with a narrative or a draft of any changes or not to the existing bylaws.
Yeah. Okay.
Then we'll go to the next. Thank you, Dave.
All right, moving on to fiscal 25 budget. And we'll just go over the highlights of the fiscal 25 preliminary budget and then talk about it and answer any questions that come up. So in terms of the major items in the 25 budget, we've got a 5% increase in our disposal fees built in. And as you recall, these have been discussed at prior committee meetings, board meetings. We're also increasing the regional disposal fees for a couple of regional customers. And this primarily pertains to single stream material for customers like Republic and Recology, with the intent to get everybody to the same single stream processing rate of $40 a ton. The impact of increasing our disposal fees and these regional fee increases, we're gonna increase our disposal fee revenue about 9.2% over the fiscal 24 budget. Now, the next biggest item in the revenue is the MRF revenue, and that's increasing by about 39% over the fiscal 24 budget. And that is essentially due to the higher commodity prices that we've seen in fiscal 24. And the expectation that those prices will remain at that level in fiscal 25. We're not expecting any increase or decrease.
Quick question, because the last time it just kind of out of nowhere, it collapsed and we weren't getting any money. So
Yes.
what makes you think that, we are gonna have this expectation throughout the whole year?
Well, the commodity prices have been pretty stable throughout pretty much all of fiscal 2024. And there's no indication that they're going to change dramatically from where they are now.
All right,
So
just curious.
we're being, you know, cautiously optimistic, I guess is the way to look at it. You know, they could go up, they could go down as we see. So MRF revenue is expected to go up. Power revenue is decreasing about 36%. And the reason for the decrease there is that, I guess, based on historical trends, where, you know, the fiscal 24 has been a very low year for power revenue, combination of factors contributing to that. There's been more repair and maintenance work necessary for the LFG field and the power generating machines. And also there's been more power interruptions from PG&E. Some of those are weather related. But when PG&E shuts off or has an interruption, then we can generate power. And we can't really predict when that's gonna happen. So we're being fairly conservative in fiscal 25 and using a number that's consistent with kind of what, you know, recent trends have been. So total revenue is increasing about 14% over the fiscal 24 budget and about 20% over the fiscal 23 actual. On our expense side, employment costs are expected to increase about 14% over the 24 budget and about 24% over the fiscal 23 actuals. What's gone into the employment costs assumptions are, we're expecting about a budget of 15% increase in health insurance premiums. We don't know what that number is actually going to be finally, but you know, since the health insurance premiums tend to do increase every year, we feel that's a fairly conservative number. Ideally, it will be less than that. There are also ongoing labor negotiations right now. And you know, we don't know what the final outcome of those negotiations are going to be. However, we have included a 5% increase in the salary wages in anticipation of the finalization of the MRF or the negotiations. There's a, you know, a slight increase in workers' comp costs in fiscal 25. We're not expecting any increase in our CalPERS costs in fiscal 25. Our non-salary expenses are expected to increase about 19% over the 24 budget and about 17% over the 23 budget. You know, the big expense, non-employment expense items are recycling services, and that's the activity that we have with Keith Day. You know, he processes all the green waste, yard waste material that comes in. And, you know, we're probably going to be spending in fiscal 24, you know, close to $3 million with him. And so, you know, that number will probably be the same or maybe more in fiscal 25. Just, you know, it's all pretty much volume driven.
Just to add on that one item there is that we are have a net revenue, so we have a positive revenue for doing business with Keith Davis. The cost is going up, but we still have a net revenue derived from it.
Right. And then the other big non-salary expense item is the environmental services, and that includes our LFG fields. So it's the you know, maintaining of the LFG field, you know, the wells and the pipelines, and it's also the repair and maintenance on all of the LFG equipment that takes place during the year, and also our fees that we have to pay to the county and state for, you know, air monitoring and activities such as that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious, because it says, that We got what, 5 megawatts that we generate from our methane. One of it goes towards our own power. So PG&E is down, how are we down?
Well, because when PG&E goes down, they tell us we can't generate power. They don't want us sending power to the grid if they're down.
But can we just do our little thing or no?
The way I explain it is like you're riding on a bicycle. And then the chain comes off the bicycle. And you're trying to spin your wheel, you're trying to pedal, but the power's not going anywhere. That's the situation with PG&E. So if we don't have something to push up against, then we can't run. So it's like we're literally spinning our wheels without anything to push against. It's like a chain coming off of a bike.
You don't have to get too far up in the weeds, but I thought that was kind of one of the things that were in our committees, figure out how we solve shutdowns. I know the sewage treatment plant really has issues with that. They can't go without.
You are accurate about that, and it's part of the 21 kV medium voltage project that's going to establish the connection between the gas plant and the AWPF.
So basically, we'll have our own chain.
We are going to create the ability to operate while there's no utility grid to send power to. No, it's called operating as an island or island mode.
Yeah.
You basically providing power to yourself in the sea of darkness of the utility grid.
Thank you.
So that bottom line is we're expecting net income to increase about 6% from the fiscal 24 budget, but decrease about 26% from the fiscal 23 actual. And the decrease from fiscal 23 is impact of a combination of the higher operating expenses, employment and non-employment expenses. And the fact that although we have increased disposal fees, the increase in the disposal fees is not large enough really to offset the increase in the costs of the other operating areas. There's still a few open items that need to get resolved between now and the final budget. There are CBA negotiations going on right now, the outcome of which are still not known. But as I said, we have built in a 5% anticipated increase in salary costs for the operating units that are negotiating right now in fiscal 25. Our health insurance premium costs, we don't know what the increase or change is going to be in fiscal 25. We have preliminary numbers for our workers' comp premiums and our property and liability insurance premiums from SDRMA, but we don't have the final numbers from them yet. We ideally will get those sometime early in June. They probably will not change very much from what the preliminary numbers are, and the preliminary numbers are included in the budget that we're looking at today. There's also a memo due from HR regarding our headcount and our compensation levels, as has been the custom in the past. And there's also a ReGen organization chart, which will need to be included in the next go around budget. And there's also the narrative describing the fiscal 25 capital spend budget to give a little more flavor to what some of those items are. You know, the mobile equipment stuff is probably pretty straightforward. You know, an excavator is an excavator, but some of the other capital improvement items may not be totally obvious just from a 5-word description. So that's why we have a expanded description of what those things are. Here's the revenue mix for fiscal 2025 broken down by, I suppose, the type, and then you can see the disposal fees are the biggest piece of the pie, which is continuance of what it's been in the past, 10 plus years. It's about 75% of our revenue comes across the scales. And then the next biggest item is the MRF revenue, which is the sale of the commodities, the processing fees that we charge, and the money we receive from Cal Recycle for the CRB values. And then after that, we've got power. And then the other sales category includes the sale of sand, HHW fees that we charge, and then some other certification fees that we charge customers. Disposal revenue by customer type. This is just looking at the disposal revenue. And the biggest piece of the pie there is the regional customers. And those are the customers that we have contracts with. And includes our biggest customer, which is Greenway San Jose, but it also includes Recology Republic, County of Santa Cruz, Capitola, Scotts Valley. But any customers that we have a contract with show as regional customers. The next largest group is the franchise customers, and those are the Peninsula franchise cities. And then we have commercial customers and cash customers, and those are just the customers that drive across the scales. And some pay cash, some have an account. They can actually charge their fees. Looking at personnel expenses, the biggest piece of the pie there are the wages, which makes total sense. The next is the health insurance. And then third is the CalPERS. Not expecting any increase in our CalPERS costs in fiscal 25. They'll remain at the same rate that they were in fiscal 24. Then here's the non-salary expenses, just kind of looking at, what are the largest line items there. So the recycling services, as I touched on, that's essentially Keith Day and the services he does here on site. Repairs and maintenance, that's the activities of the shop, keeping all of the equipment operating on the site. Environmental services, that's primarily the LFG activity that takes place, which is maintaining all of the wells and the gas field, and also the engines generating the power. Gas, then you gotta ask gas, fuel, and oil insurance, taxes and surcharges, which is the fees we pay the state and the county for the material that we landfill, and then down the line. Capital spending for fiscal 25, the budget is 25.5 million. On the mobile equipment side, the larger items is we've got a water truck and a wheel loader, and then we've got some electric forklifts, a couple of excavators. The total mobile equipment budget is 4.3 million. On the capital improvement side, total is 21.2 million. And the larger items there are the Mod 7 development, compost site, and the M1W power connection. This page just looks at what our sort of our cash position is beginning of fiscal 24 and projected through fiscal 25, and our ability to make sure we are in compliance with our bond covenant. Our bond covenant says our ratio of net current revenue to debt service has to be at least 1.25. We're projected to be at 3.5 in fiscal 25. And our debt service in fiscal 25 will be roughly the same as it was in fiscal 24, about $4 million. And that's a quick summary of what the fiscal 25 budget looks like. Be happy to take any questions this time.
Any questions? Wendy? Now
Yeah,
that,
no questions over here. Thank you.
what about is that the bond debt that we got when we did the MRF?
Well, yeah, so
And 5 million a year, it seems like we'd have paid that off by now.
the bond issuances, it was one in 2015, one in 2018, and then we refinanced
Right,
the 2015 bonds in 2021. The 2015 bonds were issued for purposes of building the MRF and also the truck yard. So it was roughly $20 million to the MRF and $5 million to the truck yard. And those bonds were, when we refinanced, we just rolled the 2015s over to the 2021s, and they will be paid off in 2034.
2034.
Yeah.
What's the, percent now?
Well, our combined percentage is roughly about 22%. Now, that includes our regular contributions to CalPERS throughout the year, and then once a year, you know, CalPERS says you need to make a payment of X million dollars towards your unfunded liability. So overall, it's up 2% total wages.
I see, so that's basically the unfunded part, liability.
Yeah, so we're paying out, right, exactly.
Okay. I think that's it. Great presentation.
If you guys wouldn't mind, Chair, I'd like to just comment on a couple items that were brought up from the previous group. And so we do have a couple of liabilities that are not in the budget currently, that we are trying to decide how much are we gonna put forward, and that's one is the pension liability, closure, and then the post-closure liability. So 3 liabilities that are unfunded at this point. It's been part of the discussions. One of the reasons why we continue to raise the gate rate is because we wanted to be able to fund some of these on liability items that we have and create a reserve flow for them. I think it was really important for us to share this one item because it'll reflect possibly in the next version, or it may reflect after, but we are trying to consider how much of the liability are we gonna try to fund? I think it's impractical. Garth, Helen and I had a discussion around trying to cover 100% of it at this point in time. I think what we heard from the last group is start the funding process, start with small increment. And as our position changes around revenue and expenses, then we can either up the ante or decrease the ante. And I think one of the positive notions around the reserves is we can unreserve it and use the money somewhere else if we needed to. But I think we need to really start tracking these reserves. We have a fiscal responsibility around it for future generations, so you'll see those few items come back in some form. And I think we're looking at is it 25% of that full liability. We believe, for instance, the post closure is about 50 million. How much of that do we want to start on now? So they're significant, but they're also relevant to the term of the life of the landfill. So, you know, it'll surpass all of us here, but we start those engagements and we let future legacies decide how important they are. But they're important for us, so they're going to be brought up.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
Since we're in the middle of this ad hoc and we know that's gonna be rather expensive for both of our agencies. Is that being taken into consideration too, to keep, let us have some flexibility in case things come up where we have to come up with a lot of money?
Sure. So feasibility at this point, the only item we're pursuing right now is the project that's in process, the 21 kV medium voltage. All the other ones are future business cases that will need to be developed. So there is nothing outside of just the 21 kV.
Okay.
You know, as we approach the next fiscal year budget, there may be some considerations in the addition to the 21 kV that will get completed. And that would be the other 2 segments of Monterey One Water that require more energy as well. So those can be considerations for future capital outlay or review. But I think the one moving right now, 21 kV medium.
And if I could add to that, I think your reference was to the magnitude potential of spend in the feasibility study.
Well,
Basically,
somebody was a look at somebody that, which I believe you guys understand finances, taking all of that into consideration, because you don't want to increase it and then, oh my gosh, we got all this stuff starting up, decrease it, increase it, and you know, kind of get it even.
sure, that's what I was gonna get at, but for our talking purposes, that chunk in the feasibility study is cited as $100 million. Related to ReGen activities. That's in a study. That's not in this operational plan.
Right.
We're going through an investigation to assess whether there's sufficient reasons to take that into the operation plan. And, you know, so that's just process-wise. This budget is not planning for those things. Or in our 5-year budget is not planning for this feasibility study. Because those items are not adopted to be planned for yet. We're just in the study phase. That element alone, the large magnitude of capital, $100 million, that is a significant aspect in and of itself that requires additional planning that's going to be beyond this group. Because that's a large reach. And so just making the plan for how the funding is going to be gained, should there be approval to seek it, is something that's going to take a couple of years to develop. Not going to be made in this group. It's going to require a much larger professional effort in financing because of its magnitude.
It roughly was 100 million for options for us in that study. There's 100 million on things we can do here. On the flip side, when you look at Monterey, One Water was 268 million for their potentials that they have. Again, some of this ties back to deferred maintenance, deferred capital projects, deferred items. So for us, it was a realistic value on everything items that you could potentially approach in a process manner. You wouldn't need the 100 million up front, but you would need segments of that over a segment of time. And as you start investing in one, the other opportunities start showing their faces as well. So very, very rough process of design and plan. But 21 kV will be our first opportunity to start seeing which other elements could we incorporate into the future vision. I appreciate it. The second item I had was on page 10. It was on the disposal rate changes. We did have a director from the last group suggest adding a statement for some of the regional volumes. So Guy had made a suggestion to add a table there, and that was just to include regional customers, contracts, and their durations, and how much they're paying in comparison to a member. And I thought that was really important as we start strategizing for the 2036 and positioning ourselves for either off-ramping unfavorable agreements and on-ramping new favorable agreements, but a lot of intent around there to demonstrate the resiliency we have today was based on some of those larger contracts and then some of those regional contracts that have come on after that have more favorable alignment to the existing gate rate fee. So that was a request. I think it is important for us to add in there. It just adds more color to the discussion we've been having about how do we put ourselves in the best situation when it comes to 2036. Either keep GW on, but be in a position to negotiate, or bring on a bunch of people as we get to 2036 to lessen the blow or the impact to our revenue stream in 2036. So our strategy starts now. That's the informational workshop that we had that really started cascading. What are some internal items that we have to deal with over the next 10 years so we can position ourselves in a better favorable position to negotiate. And I think that is the majority of the feedback that I can cascade over. We did talk a little bit about unrestricted cash. We'd like it to stay flat, but we are spending a little bit more money than what we make, and some of it has been delayed projects that we're getting rolling and off the ground, and you'll see a little bit more of that. And I think a contribution to that has been the engineering team expanding and giving other aspects that can move projects along, get work commenced and finish projects instead of projects just stacking up and us not realizing the expense of those capital items that we have already approved for completion. So we're working on narrowing that down and to reflect the actual project coming online, and then can we get started on it right away and not wait a year or two before we do. So we're working on that process. Carson, over to you. You want to wrap this up?
Okay, well, I don't have anything else to add. If there's any more questions or comments or anything, we glad to take them. At the May board meeting, there will be another presentation of the preliminary budget, and there will be some additional items included at that presentation. So it won't look exactly the same as what you're seeing today, but
So
Ideally, the numbers will not change materially between now and then.
All right.
Just a couple comments, if I may, through the chair. Felipe, thank you for your additional comments. I think the suggestion to add the chart around quantity of materials would be really beneficial on that, who's bringing in what and what the revenue looks like. I think you said that was a suggestion from the previous group. And then I just want to back up Jerry's comments about as we think about you know, what capital we might need moving forward to implement pieces of our joint energy work with Monterey Wind Water. Definitely want to keep that sort of in the forefront of the conversation. And for me, you know, I just came out of the transportation agency meeting, and you know, we do the budget for the current year, but we'll also sort of have that 3-year projection, 3 to 5 year projection out for our work plan. And I would want to make sure that as we're thinking about you know, pre-funding things and reserves in the current year, that we are also have, you know, that really clear intentionality of what some of the big capital expenditures might look like over the next 5 years, so that we don't overcommit capital that we would otherwise want to be investing elsewhere. So thank you for bringing that up, Jerry.
just to comment on Director Rudasky's, we do have a 5-year capital plan, and we'll continue to dive into every year and see if the needs are changing in the perspective of those 5 years.
Yeah,
We
perfect. Thank
appreciate the
you.
comments. Thank you.
Sure. And if I may add for clarity, only approved projects are presented in the capital plan. So, the example is the feasibility study. Any project that might grow out of that study will first need to be approved by the board before we enter it into the capital plan.
All right, so, see, I guess we go to item 6, general manager.
Sure, I have only a few today. I'd like to thank Guy for joining me at the Monterey One Water Joint feasibility presentation, the one that we had at our last board meeting. We attended to support any questions that came from their board, so we were there Monday evening, answered questions, and it was a very productive meeting on answering questions for those directors. Managers completed a webinar that was a mandatory webinar for managing marginal employees. That was a suggestion from our HR director, Torres. It was a training conducted by Lieber, Cassidy, and Whitmore. 4-hour training, very, I think it came down to 3 or 2, something like that. We just kind of speeded up the video. But it was very intentful around imagining employees and bringing up difficult conversations to have. We have 2 vacancies that we've been interviewing for: the power systems maintenance technician, the safety manager. We've made a proposal for the safety manager position, and at some point we'll come back to the board and make an introduction. The power systems maintenance position is a little bit more difficult to fill, trying to find the right candidate that fits in with the group and the objective of that department, right? It's a 24-hour facility that runs constantly and has a need of people to leave what they're doing now to come and tend to the facility. So for 2 people, it's quite a challenge. I think we'll add a 3rd and then potentially evaluate at that point to see if there's any additional need. There's an enormous amount of overtime that goes with that department because of the need of the 24-hour operation and the need that it calls for when the power goes down or there's an interruption and a reset to the engines have to occur. I think most recently, Gilbert came in at 3 a.m. in the morning, do a reset. That's an example, and then he comes in and he starts the shift. So a lot of stuff to be done there and evaluate there. And the other thing with the power systems engines is we analyzed, you know, it's an aging cogen plant. We have an engine in there that's 18 years old, approaching 19. We have some that are as young as 7, and in between there, landfill gas quality also impacts the operation of those cogen engines. Module 7 construction, We paused, the construction of module 7 during the winter season. We're back at it, and we'd like to see that, near its completion. It's gonna bring value, to the operation, stable, fill area, and then also, looking at the overall network of our gas system to try to produce better quality gas and have, areas of the landfill that are uninterrupted. Right now, we consistently are interrupting our gas process that's, being managed, so we want to look at another opportunity there. Staff will be attending the Pacific Grove Good Old Days, the 4th and 5th. We've got a bunch of volunteers and candidates to go and provide public education. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the future agenda items?
It'll be all budget based until we get it approved.
Okay, then I guess, we're adjourned.